This story isn't mine. I heard it from an older foreman who'd been in the industry for a long time. He said it happened about 10 years ago. And after hearing it, I couldn't sleep right for a week. The guy this happened to, let's call him Danny, mid-30s. Nothing special, just a regular guy who'd saved every paycheck his whole life, took out a big loan, and finally opened his own little shop. You know how they say 9 out of 10 small businesses fail? Danny was the 9. He burned through his savings, then his severance, then a second loan. One morning he woke up and realized he didn't care anymore. He shut the place down. When he added up the damage, 60, maybe $70,000 in the red. No house, no savings, just debt and silence where his life used to be. So he disappeared into a factory job out in the countryside. Metal parts factory, the kind of place where the nearest town is 20 minutes away and the streetlights stop a mile before the gate. 2 days on day shift, 2 days off. 2 days on night shift, 2 days off. Housing included, which is the only way a man with no money can take a job like that. He dropped his bag in the dorm and followed the foreman, let's call him Ray, on a tour. Quiet guy, flat expression, seemed fine. A month in, Danny had settled in. The crew was mostly older guys, big brothers as they called each other. They were warm, slapped him in the back, passed him cigarettes, slid beers across the table. For the first time in years, Danny felt like he belonged somewhere. That's when the trouble started. There was one guy in particular, a wiry man in his late 40s named Derek. He had a weird tell. Normally his voice was flat country, but when he got excited, a thicker, older accent would bleed through. Like he'd lived 2 lives and one was peeking through the cracks. One afternoon after lunch, Derek lit a cigarette and said real casual, "You play cards, Danny?" "Sure. Used to in high school." "Game tonight. Ray's apartment. 8 o'clock. Come down." Danny said sure. Didn't think anything of it. That night he walked over, pressed the buzzer. A cloud of smoke rolled out when the door opened. A guy Danny didn't recognize was standing there. "Come on in." He walked into a surprisingly big apartment, and right in the middle of the living room was a real poker table. Green felt, cup holders, professional grade. The other players were already sitting down. Every single one of them was from Danny's own crew, the big brothers who'd been so nice to him. Derek was there grinning. Ray himself came out of his back room long enough to nod, say "Good luck, boys," and disappear. The stranger at the door slid chips across. 1,000, 10,000, $100 to start. Transfer to Ray's account. Danny transferred. Got his chips. And the game began. Minimum bet was $1. Max was 50. Nothing wild. Danny played careful, tried to feel the rhythm, and bled through his entire $100 before he even warmed up. He laughed it off. First night. I'm rusty. Went home. A week later, Derek slid up again. Game tonight. Come get your money back. Danny went. Lost his 100 in 30 minutes. And then something shifted in him. That little voice in the back of his head started whispering, "You can win it back." He bought in again. Lost. Bought in a third time. Lost. $300 in one night. Back in his dorm, he sat shaking, not from cold, from shame. He pulled up YouTube and searched things you shouldn't search. Card switching, sleight of hand, cheating, practiced for hours. His fingers were too clumsy. At 2 a.m., he gave up and told himself, forget it. $400. It's a lesson. Move on. The next afternoon, Derek came up to him grinning like a wolf. Rough night, huh? You should come Friday. Friday's where the real money is. It felt like taunting. Danny's face stayed polite, but inside he was furious. He pulled aside a younger guy he'd gotten close with, a kid named Kevin. 25 sharp, knew his way around trouble. Embarrassed, Danny told him about the game. Kevin grinned. Marked deck. Swap the deck out for one you've prepped. Easier than sleight of hand. Wait for everyone to look away just once and make the swap. One hand. Don't get greedy. That night, Danny drove into town and bought a deck exactly like the one they used. Spent 3 hours in his dorm prepping it, marking, sorting, ready. And then he looked down at the rigged deck under the flickering fluorescent light and thought, what am I doing? He put it in his drawer, shut it, told himself he was done. Friday came. Danny stayed in his dorm. Knock, knock. It was Ray himself, arms crossed. You coming to the game? Not feeling great. I'll sit out. Ray shrugged and walked away. 30 seconds later, Danny's phone rang. It was Derek, and that thicker accent was already bleeding through. You not coming? We're short one. You had all week to tell me. The hell you playing at? Danny snapped. I'm the one who lost the money. And now you're cussing me out? Fine, I'll be there. He hung up, sat there, then reached for the drawer, pulled out the rigged deck, and thought, you're dead, Derek. All of you. He called Kevin. I need one favor. He walked into Ray's apartment with the rigged deck under his jacket. Tonight's buy-in was $500, not $100. Different faces at the table except Derek. He played defense, folded bad hands, bled down to half his stack, lit a cigarette and zoned out. Waiting. Under the table, he texted Kevin. Now. A minute later, knock, knock. Every head in the room snapped toward the door, and in that 1 second, Danny swapped the decks, tucked the real one inside his jacket, laid the rigged one down like nothing had happened. It was Kevin at the door, grinning, holding a six-pack. Heard Danny was playing, figured I'd watch. Ray waved him to a chair. Kevin sat. Danny dealt. And the hand that came down was enormous. Everyone at the table had something strong because Danny had rigged it that way. Everyone was pushing chips. Pretty soon the chips ran out, and they started wiring real money into the pot from their phones, promising to settle after. The pot grew to the price of a mid-size car. When it was Danny's turn, he slid his cards forward with a grin. Monster hand, near the top of the game. He reached for the pot, and the guy across from him flipped his own cards. One rank higher. Danny's heart dropped through the floor. He looked at Derek, and Derek was there, across the table, trying so hard not to smile it was making his whole face twitch. That's when Danny realized they had set him up. Every game, every loss, every taunt. Kevin, his friend, had been in on it. They had a camera on the table. They had been watching the whole time. Danny stood up shaking. What is this? Derek played dumb. Lucky me, I got out early. Hurry up and pay the man, Danny. I'm not paying. You people cheated me. Every man at the table stood up. They beat him. 5 against 1. Danny's a big guy, 6'2", but he didn't stand a chance. They pinned him, took his phone, unlocked it with his face, and transferred every dollar out of his accounts. And it wasn't enough. The pot was bigger than his whole life savings. The winner stood up, dusted himself off, looked down at Danny bleeding in the floor, and said calmly, "Year of hard work, that should cover it." And they filed out. Danny crawled to Ray's back room. "Boss, that was a scam, right?" Ray didn't turn from the TV. "Danny, That's between you and the guys you were gambling with. I wasn't at the table. Don't bring it to me." The next week, Derek cornered him at the smoking area, handed him a coffee, stuck a cigarette in his mouth. Very gently, like he was giving advice to a son, he said, "Danny, you don't understand what that man does for a living. He collects debts, professionally. He is a ghost. You will pay him back, or you will wish you had." Danny threw the coffee in the dirt and walked away. And then things started getting strange. Danny started feeling drowsy at work. Not normal tired, wrong tired. He'd be running a machine, wide awake 1 second, and the next his eyelids would drop. He slapped his own face, splashed cold water on himself. Nothing worked. Until one afternoon, running a machine called a power press, an industrial machine that stamps metal with thousands of pounds of force. Danny nodded off, just a half second, a blink, and his hand was inside the press. When he jerked awake, the press had already cycled. His right hand was gone, flattened. He screamed, and then shock took him, and he passed out. He woke up 2 days later in a hospital. They'd had to amputate at the wrist. And here's the part that'll get you. Ray so generously arranged for him to keep his job, one-handed work available, and Derek came to visit him in his dorm. Sat down on the edge of the bed, looked him in the eye. "Danny, you want to hear something funny? You know who put your hand in that press?" Danny stared. Derek smiled. "I did. You think we didn't see the deck swap?" "Danny, you cheated. We just needed a reason." Over the following weeks, Danny pieced it all together. Ray was the head of the whole operation. Every new hire was a target. Guys like Derek would butter them up, bring them to the games, let them win once, then slowly bleed them dry. Rig one big pot, trap them in a debt so enormous it'd take years to pay off. And here's the ugliest part. Payroll didn't come from the owner, came from Ray. Ray collected the payroll in a lump sum and distributed it himself, which meant he could take it. Every month, a debt collection came out of each man's paycheck before he ever saw it. Just enough left over to survive. These men weren't employees. They were slaves, hundreds of miles from anywhere, in a town too small to have a real police station. Some had been there for years. Kevin, the friend, had been caught in the trap himself years earlier. He'd been selling Danny out because Ray owned him too. Some of them had tried to call the police, but the local cops were bought off. The owner of the factory knew everything. He just didn't care. As long as the factory ran, Ray could do whatever he wanted with the men inside. And when the gambling debts finally got paid down, they were kept in chains another way. High-interest loans from Ray and his crew. Borrow to eat, owe more, never leave. Danny escaped within a year. He wouldn't tell the foreman exactly how. Said the details were things he was too ashamed to talk about. Things he did. Things he had to do. A long, complicated escape is all he'd say. He made it out. One hand gone. Most of his money gone. Most of his trust in humanity gone. But alive. And he said, and this is the part the foreman said sticks with him the most to this day, when he sees a cigarette cloud roll out of a doorway, he freezes. He can smell that apartment. He can hear the cards shuffling, and he can see Derek's smile. So that's the story. A hellhole factory that swallows men whole. And as far as I know, it's still operating somewhere out in the countryside. Be careful who deals you in.